We were kids who were placed in the system and we were expected to function like every other normal kid in the United States. But in reality, we were normal kids. We didn't have any physical deformity or anything visible, but we had scars that were invisible. A lot of us did not make it. Some of them died because of they joined a gang. Some didn't make it through depression. I think, overcoming all, like when I look, I see, like a kid. We had the war. Kids are, to be seen but not to be heard from. So nobody was comforting us or, there to attend your emotions and say, you went through war. You watch people blown into parts. We lost our belonging, our home, our whole identity. But this is why nobody ever said that. So it just left us alone. And then we came here, and here in the United States, people are like, oh, here's your physiology needs in your home and everything. But you're forced so much to just be your own self in a short period of time. And all you hear is, why are you not assimilating? Why are you not becoming? But that time is when I felt like when we were our worst self, it's when for the first time, we were no longer, as a kid, I was no longer watching after my sibling. I was no longer worried about water or food or if my mother would get to a medical, facility every time she had a miscarriage. So after all that, responsibility was no longer on my shoulders. I was forced to face me. My highest point will be who I am today. Yeah. Now that I am an interpreter myself, working in Maine, I find that a lot of people would put me under the category of an expert. And I used to say that, what qualifies me to be an expert? I'm just a Somali person. I learned what Somalia is and how their government was working, whatever. Like any other American person, I Google a lot. Even though we have one culture, one language, whatever, we also have different cultures individually. Every household have their own little culture, that the way they raise their kids, the way they go about the Islamic religion is different than the next door. So not to assume that we all dress alike, eat alike, talk alike. It's not the case,
This is Najma, a 20-year-old woman from Somalia. Last year, Najma and her husband were set to be resettled by the United Nations to Lewiston, Maine. 2 weeks before their departure, Najma's husband died of a respiratory infection he contracted in the refugee camp. A month later, now in Lewiston, Najma discovered she was pregnant. Najma's neighbor urged her to make an appointment to see a doctor. She said it was very important for the health of Najma and her baby. In Somalia, people only see a doctor if they feel sick, but trusting her new friend, Najma made an appointment. The receptionist told her to come at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. She had errands to run till 5, but in Somalia, patients wait to be seen, sometimes in the order they arrive, sometimes at the discretion of the doctor, sometimes for hours. So coming later would just mean someone else would get the chance to see the doctor first. The errands took a little longer than expected, so Najma arrived at 5:30 and was flustered to find the clinic had closed. When Najma called the next day, the receptionist said that they closed at 4, as always, and that Najma needed to show up the next day at 10 a.m. or else there'd be no time for her for a month. This wasn't anything like the system she was used to. Najma felt terrible being spoken to like this. She hadn't meant to convey any disrespect to the receptionist, and she was frustrated because she had no idea why she, a healthy woman, was going to the hospital anyway. The next morning, Najma took a little longer than normal getting out of bed. She'd been sleepy in the mornings lately, but she was only 15 minutes late, so she figured she was close enough. The receptionist did not agree. She rebuked Najma for her selfishness and lack of respect for others. She then handed Najma a clipboard of forms to fill out and sign. None of this made any sense. In Somalia, there are no set appointment times. Doctors take as long as they need with each patient and then call the next in line. There aren't any forms to sign because records are seldom kept. Najma wondered if the forms meant she was in trouble. She could speak and read simple English, and the forms had many questions about her family and her past. Some questions were very personal. Were these questions for the police? Would they be used against her? She wished her husband were here to handle these things. She felt like there was no one to help her. She did as she was told and filled out the forms, hoping not to get into any more trouble. Najma's name was called by a cheerful woman who introduced herself as a nurse. She didn't know that word. The nurse did things Najma expected the doctor to do, taking her blood pressure and pulse. She asked more personal questions. Then she left, saying the doctor would be along. Najma waited 10 minutes for the doctor. Why had the receptionist been so angry about Najma not arriving on time if she was just going to be kept waiting? Why not just come get her when they were ready? In Somalia, the powerful often kept subordinates waiting. She guessed that's what was happening here. The doctor finally came. Najma was relieved. The doctor looked at the computer and then examined her a little. She said Najma showed signs of anemia. She told her she was ordering a blood draw for a full CBC and a prenatal panel. Najma didn't understand any of that, except bloodletting, which was a treatment in Somalia sometimes. She didn't feel sick, but the doctor said she had something wrong with her. She was embarrassed and scared to ask the wrong questions, so she didn't ask what it was. The doctor left, and a lab tech came and took some of her blood. After the appointment, Najma was confused about who her doctor was. In Somalia, you only saw the doctor, but there were so many people here, and the one she spent the most time with was the nurse. Was the nurse the doctor here? Najma got a call 2 days later from the nurse, saying they wanted to test her hemoglobin and ferritin levels. The nurse also said they would send her a card telling her what foods to eat. Najma got the card titled Iron-Rich Foods. It was full of strange foods she didn't eat and didn't know how to cook. She knew some foods were used as medicine, but she didn't feel sick, and she ate good food anyway, so she threw it away. Somali doctors typically call patients to schedule follow-ups, so when the doctor never called, she decided to take it as a blessing and be done with it. Nothing helpful had come from her visit, and it had been very unpleasant. A few weeks later, Najma's neighbor got to asking how the appointment had gone. She was dismayed to hear what a catastrophe it had been. She took it upon herself to phone the office and schedule another appointment for Najma. In the interim, the entire healthcare team at Najma's clinic had attended cultural competency seminars conducted by Maine intercultural communication consultants, and they'd learn how to better treat patients like Najma by examining their own culture, learning about Somali culture, and discovering the many unexpected ways culture shapes us all. They also learned cultural bridging techniques to communicate their messages more effectively, as you'll see in a moment. This time, the receptionist gave Najma a reminder call for her appointment, and she explained that the doctor only had a short time with each patient before the next one. Each patient had to be there on time or they'd miss their spot, like you'll miss the sunset if you aren't there to see it. This was different for Najma, but it made sense. She was always on time to appointments after that. When she got to the clinic, the receptionist told Najma why she had to fill out those forms. They were for records, so the office could remember every patient over time. Sometimes doctors could look back and solve illnesses that a doctor without records couldn't solve. And if Najma got a new doctor, he or she would know all about her. She told Najma the information was confidential, which meant it could never be shared without her permission or used against her. The nurse explained her role to Najma. She was part of a big team that worked to keep lots of patients healthy. She explained why patients sometimes have to wait for the doctor. She told her that some patients need extra care, or sometimes emergencies happen, but by being ready in the room, Najma could see the doctor as soon as possible. The doctor came in, and this time she explained anemia, and how even though Najma didn't feel sick now, it could make her very sick later. It was hard for Najma to understand being sick without feeling sick, or the idea of curing an illness in the future. But the doctor explained how they could see the causes of sickness before they were felt, and before they were dangerous. The doctor said she'd like to do more blood tests and explained what could be learned from those tests. She asked Najma if that was okay. Najma's doctor provided her with another list of iron-rich foods, but this list was developed in partnership with members of the local Somali community. It featured foods that Somalis ate and could buy locally, and some recipes too. Najma recognized some of the foods as being fed to pregnant women in Somalia, and now she understood why they were good for her. Najma asked the doctor if she could be a community partner too, so she could help patients like herself understand how to get the care they needed. The doctor said that would be wonderful. Remember, no one knows everything about every culture, let alone every individual within every culture. But by increasing your cultural competency, mistakes can become opportunities for learning and authentic human connection. Working cultural competency into all levels of your practice, gaining insight into your own culture as well as others, and using the cultural bridging techniques like the ones discussed here will allow you to serve all patients with the best, most equitable healthcare possible.